All right, welcome to the Intern podcast, everybody. I'm Lindsay Aarons here with NFL communications leader, Mr. Zak Gilbert. Thank you so much for joining me today, Zak.
You're welcome, Lindsay. Good to be with you.
So I know that you now work with the NFL, and I want to get into all of that. But since this is a baseball-centered podcast, I know that you did work in the MLB. Can you tell me a bit about your experience with that?
Yeah, it was my first full-time job. I had the privilege of working for the Colorado Rockies. I was very young and right out of college, and we hosted the Major League Baseball All-Star Game that year. So it was a good experience, and I worked many hours. Did not see my family very much. I traveled, and I did not make a lot of money. So I am I'm grateful for the experience, but it definitely was very taxing.
Do you have a favorite memory of your time that you spent with the Rockies?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I was very fortunate to come to know one of my mentors, Clint Hurdle. He's a former player. He became a Major League Baseball manager for the Rockies. He led the Rockies later on to the World Series, and then also managed the Pittsburgh Pirates and helped the Texas Rangers get to the World Series also. But one of the cool things about baseball when you're traveling is um, they have this thing called early batting practice, and it's before the traditional batting practice. It's very informal. The stadium is completely empty. It's very quiet. And Clint Hurdle invited me to come take some cuts in the actual batter's box in the stadium. So those are my favorite memories. The few times that he asked me to do that.
That's so cool that you had the opportunity to do that. So now that it's the off season for the MLB, can you tell me what that looks like from the standpoint of somebody who worked within an organization?
What the off season is like for Major League Baseball.
Or like for you, by having had worked in that, like what was your experience during the off season since that's what teams are going through right now?
Yeah, I worked in the public relations department. So if we weren't, uh, once we were done, we never made the postseason while I was there. But once we were done with our last game, we dove right into our off-season publications, and the major publication is the media guide, the annual media guide. So my role was do all the desktop layout, design, and research, and write all the bios for the media guide. So I was the point person for that, and that occupied pretty much all of my time from October 1st until we went to spring training in Tucson, Arizona.
Gotcha. Okay. So that was your off season. And what about what was your day-to-day life during the actual season working in PR?
A typical day for a home game was very long. I think for a night game, we'd probably try to arrive about 10 o'clock. We were in charge of publicity. So the major project every day was game notes. So writing the pregame notes that radio, television, media, and the newspaper writers would use. That was my main job. We arrived about 10 o'clock. And then for a 7 o'clock game, we weren't able to leave until 10 or 10:30. And it was very long and very taxing days. And then the hardest part was to turn around after a night game and go into a day game the next day with a series finale. And then sometimes we even had to get on a plane right after that day game and fly to the next city. So
that sounds like it had to be super tough with the games being night games,
yeah.
day games. I don't know how you do that quick turnaround. So let's get away from just talking about baseball and take me through your career. Like, where did you start out? Like, I know we went to college. What did you major in? Just take me through your entire career up until where you're at now.
Yeah, I majored in journalism. Went to the University of Colorado at Boulder. I always tell people that I really did not. I didn't get as much out of my education as I did out of my experience. And my true education was the experience that I had working for the sports information department at the University of Colorado. I was fortunate to be the chief undergraduate assistant in the media relations office. for the Buffaloes. And my first year there in 1994 as a freshman, we won the Heisman Trophy. And I learned very quickly that the sports information office has a huge role in promoting and campaigning for Heisman trophies. And one of my mentors there taught me all about it. I'm very fortunate in terms of timing to be there. And then I worked all throughout college in that office. We went to bowl games. Colorado at that time was highly ranked in the top 10 every year, and an incredible experience. And the biggest thing that did for my career is it really introduced me to the network of my mentor there, who led that department, the sports information department. And really in sports, probably more so than any other industry, it is truly all who you know. It's all about who you know, and that's how you're able to get success in this business.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's really cool that you had that experience with the Heisman Trophy, at Colorado. And then how did you end up working at MLB? I know you said you did that straight out of college, right?
Yeah. They had an entry level position. I actually did my first graduate internship with the Denver Broncos in '97. It was my senior year. My last semester of college was also my internship year with the Broncos in the fall. I graduated in December of that year, and then right into January, I went right to the. I heard about the position through my network and applied, and I was fortunate to get the job, and I just went right to work on the Rockies media guide right there. And then the next thing I knew, we were off to spring training.
That's awesome. So I know we talked a lot about your experience with the Rockies, and how did you go from that to where you're at with the NFL? What was the timeline of transitioning into football?
Yeah, it's a great story. I think after a few years, I realized, having had the experience working in college football and then also working for the Denver Broncos, I realized I was able to compare those three: college football, the NFL, and Major League Baseball. And I really realized that I had a young family. I was married and had two young children at that time. And I realized that the NFL was by far the best place for me and for my family in terms of the routine and the limited travel. Every road trip was 24 hours as opposed to 7 to 10 days. And so I made that decision that I really wanted to get back into the NFL. And then I really relied on my network during my internship at the Broncos. I made a lot of contacts, kept in close touch with all of them. And it's a great story how I got it back into the NFL. 2001, there was an opening at the Green Bay Packers, and I had no idea it existed. So I was working for the Colorado Rockies, and then the intern that came the year after I was at the Denver Broncos, he worked for the Broncos in 1998. He actually applied for that position with the Packers, and the Packers called the Broncos to ask about him. And because I had kept in touch with the Broncos and asked them, basically, if you hear of any positions open, please let me know. I'm interested in getting back in the NFL. Because I had done that, when the Packers called the Broncos to ask about this other person, the Broncos were able to say something along the lines of, well, that guy's he's really good, but you should also look at this other person who's working for the Colorado Rockies. And that was how I even knew about the position, the vacancy with the Packers, and then also how I was fortunate to be able to apply for that position and then get the interview and eventually get the job.
That's awesome. So did you work with any other organizations after the Packers and into your transition to just the league itself?
Yeah, I've worked for so many different organizations and different industries and sports. And I loved my time at the Packers, though. It was very special. I cherish that.
Thank you so much for your time today and answering my questions. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize for the background noise and the driving. Sorry
You're all
about
good.
that.
Don't worry. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.